good morning, good afternoon, good evening. From wherever you're joining us in the world, we thank you for being a part of the November edition of the Global Unites webinar series. This month, we're discussing a very important topic of the inclusion of women in peace building. As we head into the discussion, we want to invite you to participate. In the comment section below this video, we ask that you submit your questions or comments so that we can continue to discuss the inclusion of women in peace building. And it is my honor today to welcome Ms. Visaka Dharmadasa as our guest speaker as we engage on this topic. Ms. Dharmadasa is the founder and chair of the Association of War-Affected Women and Parents of Servicemen Missing in Action. She was nominated for a collective Nobel Peace Prize in 2005 in coordination with the 1,000 Peace Women Across the Globe movement. She's a member of the Human Rights Commission in Sri Lanka, and she's also a member of Inclusive Security's Women Waging Peace Network. She's on the Global Advisory Council of Women Thrive Worldwide, and she's a member of the Women's Alliance for Security Leadership. She holds degrees from the U.S. Institute of Peace in Negotiations and Mediation Skills, and a degree from Harvard University in Women and Security. Ms. Dharmadasa, welcome. We are so honored to have you.
Thank you. It's really a pleasure to be here.
As we head into the topic, the inclusion of women in peace building, you have worked extensively here in the peace building process in Sri Lanka. Can you just share some of your story with us as we head into the conversation?
I come into this field as a mother of a missing service personnel, and together with other women, we wanted to find what has happened to our sons. So we went to the jungles. And subsequently, our visit exactly created the ceasefire. So that's exactly the biggest achievement that we could bring about to the Sri Lankan peace process at that time.
And so as we head into this discussion and talking about women in peace building and inclusion of women in peace building, not only on the larger levels, but also on the grassroots level, can you share with us from your perspective why it's so important to include women in the peace building process?
The thing is, when it comes to grassroots level, when it's come to the community level, women do build peace across the world. They are there because, we do know that the conflicts affects men and women differently, and women are impacted also in various ways. So especially when there are little uneasiness in the communities, it's women who are the one who detect it. Because they are in the community and they work with the people for their day-to-day work. So they detect, and usually women, I was thinking about it like women as good mediators. Why? Because domestically, that's what we do. We mediate between our husband and the children. We mediated among the children. Right. So to keep the family peace, constantly we do this mediation. And the same way we also, with the community, we do this. We do mediate. And women exactly engage in peace building across the globe at that level. But what is the challenge is to bridge the gap and get the women to peacemaking the formal processes as well.
Right.
That's exactly the challenge.
Right. And so as we head into the discussion, I want to encourage you again to submit any comments or questions that you have. We don't want this to just be a conversation between me and Ms. Dharmadasa. We want to hear your opinions from your context and what you have going on in your country. So please feel free to comment or ask questions at any point throughout the discussion. We have people from Colombia, South America, Uganda, here in Sri Lanka, Kenya, joining us so far on this call. And so to get things started, I just want to ask a general question. In the year 2000, the UN Security Council passed Resolution 1325, which was a huge step forward for women when it comes to peace building because, number one, it acknowledged the fact that women are extremely marginalized, one of the most marginalized communities among any war region. And it also, as a result of that, said that they should play a key role in the peace-building aspect. So this was 17 years ago, and we've seen progress, but it still doesn't look like on the larger scale of peace building that there's been a huge advance for women in decision-making roles. Why do you think that's the case?
Of course, yes. Resolution 1325 is the resolution which really opened the doors. It's not necessarily only about women, but notably it also speaks about civil society's engagement in formal peacemaking. That is something very special, and of course the subsequent sister resolutions. We have made, I think, a remarkable progress of the participation pillar, especially when you really look at the women's political participation. So post 1325, you see a significant awareness throughout the world. People, even in Sri Lanka and elsewhere, people speak more about women's participation. But when it comes to women's participation in peacemaking, right, I think we still really have to go a very long way. It's, for me, really looking at a country where there are two parties, engage in an armed conflict, because it's not like the old days. It's also very complex, and also in any given conflict now there are more than even two parties. You get multiple stakeholders coming in, and normally the first instant what they do is, because they want to silence the gun, they bring the warlords and of course the politicians to the table.
Right.
So that is why also one way what the women's group thought, if we have more women in politics, then that may be the way that you can get the women to come to the table. But for us, it's not necessarily only that women have to be in politics to come there, but even women from civil society, because we know exactly what's happening on the ground. So, I mean, it is a challenge, but we have not definitely made much progress, but we have to work harder on that, and convince. There are lots of good examples, but I mean, it's taking time.
Right. And part of that is also kind of changing the narrative for the younger generation. For what they've seen throughout history, we want to make a difference in that. So in a lot of the places that we work in, most of the places that we work in, it's grassroots level engagement. So what does the inclusion of women in peace building on the grassroots level look like? How does that look like in our individual communities?
I mean, naturally, women are there, peace building at grassroots. If you take, I mean, throughout the country, if you take the Fiji Islands, we do know when there was conflict, it's the women who came out. Again, if you take Colombia, so across the board throughout the world, in all conflicts and where the global unites, I mean, all these countries, we do know women have played a crucial role, especially at the grassroots. They're there and they are building peace. But bringing that voice into the table, when it comes to the negotiation table, that's exactly the biggest challenge. And it's nice for youth to join hands with us to strengthen the call, because we do have success stories. I mean, we do have Northern Ireland as a success story. Then Luz Mendes from Guatemala, she sat on the table. So there's a very few, you can count the numbers.
Right. So would success be having more women at the table? Is just having them at the table important, or is it giving them leadership roles in this peace building process as well? How do you?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, not just having them as tokens on the table. Sri Lankan peace process also we did have. At one point when I asked the LTT, where are the women? So they had the woman sitting, Mrs. Balasingham, there, but I was telling that she's just like a secretarial post, but she was not really taking part in the discussions. So it's extremely important, because women will bring a different perspective, not necessarily only on women's issues, but on the whole, foreign policy, economy, I mean, in all these, even defense.
Right.
All these areas. It's not necessarily that women are going to the table to speak on women's issues, but they will be definitely speaking about the future, because the fact that we also care about the future, we also care about the finance, we also care about the foreign policy of our countries, but we also bring a different perspective into that.
That's right. And so in moving things forward, and how do, with history being so male-centered in so many different aspects of life, what are some practical things that we can do from your experience to challenge that narrative for the younger generations? How do we show them that it's not, that there aren't certain roles for certain genders in certain areas, that and everyone needs to be at the table, part of the conversation?
Especially, working on gender equality, and I think that's a big push, and also from home, as you told. That's extremely important within the household, to when you bring up children, whether it's a girl or a boy, to bring them up, as equal. So that's a big part for the mother and father both to play at home. So that's one thing. But then also schools, it's extremely important in schools to have this equality, and also to exactly convince. This is why for the UN, Resolution 1325 is a UN Security Council resolution.
Right.
And then also the General Assembly passed a resolution on women and mediation. So it's the whole UN itself have taken this step, but yet we are to see that UN appoint a high-level mediator, a woman.
Right.
So I think we have to advocate to the UN itself. You have to appoint women. Unless you appoint women as the senior mediators for peace talks.
Right.
And also have some kind of a criteria when you come to a country to make peace, to tell them that for formal peace negotiations we need to see women at the table.
Right.
So come with some conditions. I think the member states as well, UN have to take a proactive role in this.
Right. It's hard to imagine that a country can find true peace if half of the population, right, and just for rough numbers, right, half men, half women, if half of the population isn't even brought into the conversation, it's hard to believe that you'll really find the right peace. And that is what negative peace is, just the absence of violence, but like positive peace is true reconciliation. It'd be hard to find that if you don't include everyone, all the voices in at the table. Again, we want to encourage you to submit any questions or comments that you'd have. We want this to be a dialogue where we're engaging aspects that you experience on your own in your own work across the world, and just any comments as well. So feel free to share those. I do want to add something personally for me. So as a male, what is something that I can do on a practical level to promote this? Aside from maybe when I become a dad and have an opportunity to raise my children in that way, but as a young activist, as a man, what can I do to promote the inclusion of women in the peace building process with my...
it is to use and seize any opportunity you get, not necessarily of thinking of the formal peace tables, but anywhere, within your office, if there's to be taken decisions. Right? So give that space. To create space every possible place. It's not necessarily to wait for a formal opportunity, but create space everywhere. And also, one thing, to listen to women. Many conflicts, if you really, really look, women from Marawi or Philippines, they said that they did tell the authorities that they see there are differences and there are something different happening. And in the same way, women of Afghanistan did tell the authorities that some people are coming into the village, there are strangers in the village, and there can be some issues. But nobody listened to those women's voices. And this is exactly very important, to listen to women's voices.
Right. And so as our movements expand, as our movements grow, we're finding that young women have this incredible energy to be involved and get involved. And that's one of the biggest movements, right, we see across the world, really, feminism, this promotion of getting women involved in these groups. So on a grassroots level, if we're having events or doing things, making sure that there's not only that there's equal participation, but also equal conversation, equal room for decisions to be made, allowing people or allowing the women to be a part of the conversation, and not just to be heard, but also to take into account and to move things forward in that way.
To take them seriously. Simple. That's the cultural challenge that we have, taking women seriously.
Right.
This is a big problem, because women may voice, but then are they taken seriously? And that's exactly what is necessary.
Right. So we have Owen from Kenya. He's asked that when I mentioned the terms negative peace and positive peace, I saw you nodding, and it's a little bit of understanding. He just would like to know maybe a little bit more insight on what negative peace and positive peace are in terms. Could you provide any insight on that?
Yeah, I mean, okay, silencing the guns is not necessarily peace. To feel, I mean, there are many societal issues that has to be in place. I mean, schools for children, people without hunger. So the day-to-day normal life has to be there.
Right.
Just silencing the guns, like what happened in 2009 in Sri Lanka. I mean, we didn't have peace, and still Sri Lanka is a post-war country. Unless the root causes are addressed, unless the people feel that justice have been meted for the issues that they have, and that someone is listening to them.
Right. Yeah. So
this is exactly, I mean, what we believe as peace is where everybody can feel that they are heard and they have dignity. I mean, the most important thing, especially in Sri Lankan conflict, what I saw was it was a war fought for dignity.
Right.
And that's exactly what is important. Whatever the solutions, dignity has to play a central role.
Right. And so we have, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, it's Rita. Just a point that they wanted to bring up, saying women are naturally peace builders, which is a virtue that we need to bring to the public table. It's kind of echoing what you're saying, whether it's what they have to do just from a maternal standpoint between the husband and the children, or in between children and in their own communities, being proponents of education, proponents of enterprise and economics. These types of examples need to be brought into the conversation. They need to be allowed to be at the table, not only just allowed to be at the table, but to also be voices heard in the conversation. I wanted to ask you this: as a woman in peace building, what has been maybe a moment of the biggest struggle for you? Was it not a point where your voice wasn't heard when you knew that there was something that needed to be addressed, or what was maybe the biggest challenge for you in actively being a woman engaged in peace building?
The biggest challenge maybe, we brokered the ceasefire, but when the ceasefire was established, like, we were not there anymore, because I still believe that if the peace process had a space to hear us, if the peace process had a space to really accommodate, the civil society in a meaningful way, and also if there was a proper communication strategy, we could have really made peace at that time.
Right.
And the same thing with the reconciliation process in Sri Lanka right now. One thing is there are lots of things happening even within the government, leave alone the civil society activities. So there has to be a coordination between all these activities, number one. Number two, there has to be a very effective communication strategy to take what they do to the people, as well bring the voices from the people. So these are very important things to happen right now in Sri Lanka.
It's not just about having this great plan, but how can we implement it further, right? It's
and also especially, we are a democracy, so you have to listen to the people, and people should know what you are doing.
Right.
So the communication to the people is extremely important.
Right. We have a question from Kapila, who is our Reconciliation Center manager in Matara. He said in Sri Lanka, mostly affected women from the war are Southerners. How can we encourage them to give, to be a part of the contribution of peace building? How can we encourage them to be in the process of peace building if they feel like they've been affected in a negative way?
Yes, this is what exactly I was speaking also, I think on Sunday I was telling, Sunday, not only, no, it was yesterday that I was speaking. It's extremely important for everybody, because this particular 30-year-long war impacted to everybody. Maybe in different degrees, but to the north, east, south, west, to the entire country. Yeah. And for reconciliation, it is extremely important for everybody's voices, for everybody's concerns to be addressed. And that's the reason the Consultation Task Force on Reconciliation Mechanisms, we went beyond the 4 mechanisms that the government proposed at Geneva, and we went beyond that and asked the people, is there anything else that you think that we have to put in place for Sri Lanka to move forward as a country where everybody could live happily? So, and that's important,
right,
to bring everybody together.
Bridging that gap, allowing all the voices.
Yeah, it's not necessarily only the North and East. We do know North and East was impacted much more because the battlefield was there. But then, of course, families of the soldiers who died as well, who are missing in action, definitely, I mean, they are all more affected.
Absolutely. We have a question from Marembe in Uganda. It says, in Africa, in the African setting, and in particular in Uganda, the thought is that matters relating to war or peace issues are only men can engage. How do we break that stereotype, also keeping in mind that the women and children are affected most by violence and therefore have a huge input on this issue? So if it's a cultural norm, which in many countries it is for men to be decision makers, how do you combat that? How do you approach that and engage it?
It's not necessarily only in many countries. I think it's a global thing, because that's why history, it's not her story. Right? It's not her story. It's his story right? And many, I think in England, if I'm right, I don't know, correct me, because I think the constitution or something speaks only about his and not, there's no he and she, but it's just he.
The right for women to vote was a huge issue.
Yeah, it's only he. So that's a global issue. And it's by proving, and I think definitely, especially when you take Africa, the women are really, really strong. As I told you, 3 million women in the South African process, in the multi-party negotiations, did take part, and they were really, really strong.
Right.
And we do know, from all over, whether it's Uganda, whether it's Somalia, whether it's Nigeria, so all these countries, women are very strong, and they are doing good work on peace building. It's a matter of exactly really advocating, pushing it, getting more visibility. I think the visibility part is, and that's why it's nice with Global Unites or the young people. You all can really bring that up. Yeah. The visibility is what is necessary. Because once you see it, then people are, it'll come to them to
keeping
understand.
It in front of them. So even as the younger generation who basically has grown up with a phone in their hand, right? Using technology to their advantage, bringing these things in front, having open discussions about these things, not only with other youth, but also bringing it up to people who are older than them that maybe they have influence on or they're connected with. It's engaging it on that way. We have another question as well from the Pratibha Media Network. I believe that's here in Sri Lanka. I'm not 100% sure. It says how the office in Sri Lanka for the missing people will affect reconciliation, and how much value is that office for the women who suffered from war?
I think it has a great value, not necessarily only for the women who have suffered from the war, but for the future generations of this country. Specifically for me, I'm really looking forward, not only, I'm definitely, we want to know the truth. I mean, that's exactly the value it will bring, because all the families across the board, whether it's missing in action, disappeared, all of them really what they want, the families want to know the truth. Yeah. So apart from that, it also will prevent, because Sri Lanka from 1971, there have been waves of disappearances. 71, 88, 89, then from 83 up to 2009, and then post-2009, the white vans and all. So, I mean, this country have had, and I think it's the second after Iraq, of where the missing issue is the highest. So it's huge. And Sri Lankans have been tolerating, because we have been thinking it's other, it's not us, it's the next door son, it's not mine. So they have kept quiet for all these years. And that's why the OMP is most important, because to work on prevention, so that our children, our grandchildren, and their children will not go missing.
And it's kind of finding that opportunity to understand someone else's plight. So if it's not my child, but it's someone else's, it's putting yourself in their shoes, right, and allowing that to kind of bridge the gap.
Yeah, well. Because I mean, this country they change regimes because of this issue, right. But still, the same thing was repeated by that regime again. So I mean, as citizens, we have to be more proactive on this to tell no, enough is enough on that.
Absolutely. And so in in moving things forward, what are some other key things that young people can do to challenge these narratives? Whether it's hereditarily passed down that men do certain things and women do certain things, how can we challenge this?
Individually, mainly it's individually. Individually, at home, in the bus stand, on the public transportation, in public. Because there are some things that the men, especially of course maybe Sri Lanka, maybe other places, men don't do. I mean, now at least you see a lot of men carrying their even children. Some, to see a man carrying a baby was not so familiar before, right? Now you see even men carrying their very small infants. So these are the things like, to do the work to help your spouse, to help your wife, even in public, like, those are the things, like, because otherwise, okay, this work I do and this work she does, so that division shouldn't be carried forward. Right. Whoever could do it should do.
And part of it comes with when it comes to education, right? And allowing the same opportunities. And obviously in today's day and age, it's a lot easier for many women to have educational opportunities than it has been in the past. But finding ways to bridge that gap as well, to not saying to allowing women to be lawyers and things, not saying that they aren't allowed to, but getting in ways and allowing them to further educate themselves and become even further part of the conversation.
The thing is, in Sri Lanka, the girl child or the boy child, there was no discrimination against each other for education. But when there are jobs, like, okay, if you're a woman, we can't hire you because if you want maternity leave, like, who is going to replace you? Mm-hmm. So these things. So that's exactly where the companies, the government have to do, where they'll have daycare systems to make it easier for women to come out and work. So, those are the systems have to be in place. And as youth, you all could advocate and also display it from wherever you all can do. Spaces for women to bring the children, because a woman can't be keeping it's very difficult to find a person to take care. But if a woman can come, and also more and more, I was just telling someone recently when I was interviewing a girl, more and more whether if you can work from home, from your computer, why not do it? Why do you want to dress and get in the traffic and come to the office and do the same work in the office in your computer? You could do it at home. Send it to me.
Yeah.
So we have to look at creative things.
Right.
Where women can really, give their 100%.
And it's almost a community level backing, right? So if we're wanting as a community for women to have more of these opportunities, then as a community we need to come together to find ways to set up daycares, to set up things that would normally maybe constrict them from a professional point of view, to allow them to do these things and to move forward. So it's even a community level engagement.
Yeah, because otherwise, for a woman, if she has to think about definitely she has to think about the child. But then again, how can she leave the small child at home and come? So she doesn't do the work. So the promotions, like especially you will see women are there a lot in middle rank. But when going top, you see lesser and lesser women going there because that very productive time when they can get the promotions. They are stuck. With childcare, definitely we everybody wants to have children. So that's as human beings, that's one of the biggest gifts we get. But how we can balance with that, with the support from the family, with the support from the society, from the government, from everybody. So these are important to have in place.
Yes, and so we going on with another question, Delina from Matara as well. He said most people think that such type of organizations for missing. Is that true? Are these organizations truly helpful for the women who are suffered from war?
Very good question. Really, really good. And I'm really grateful. Because most of the people think, the issue of the missing, the disappearances, I have been working for the 19 years now. So it's not post 2009. Even if we were really effective, if our voice was heard at that time, maybe we wouldn't have an even issue, when the war ended, because it was not taken into, as I told you, it was not taken seriously that much. Because 2003 I was in Geneva when I spoke about the missing. And definitely we are speaking about the issue of missing because we do also have more than 5,000 missing in action, who, like my son was in the Sri Lankan military, who is missing, and I'm still waiting. If you just go today to my house and you open my freezer, there is his chocolates, it's still there. The 19 long years, I'm keeping it. So it's not necessarily only for one section. It's for everybody who doesn't know what has happened to their children. So Office of the Missing or whatever the efforts that the government is taking, it's for everybody. It's for also the JVPers whom have some mothers are still waiting.
Right.
So for everybody. It was a very good question.
Yeah.
I'm really happy.
Thank you, Thelina. We have a comment from Miss Bell in Columbia, South Carolina, just saying that we always need to share our love for one another, carrying each other's burdens, help, love, and care. And that's something that can go along in moving things forward as a community and supporting those to allowing for there to be more opportunities as well. I wanted to ask you this. If we're to move things forward on a governmental level, eventually the young people who are the younger generation now are going to be the leaders in society in every level, business sector, government, doesn't matter. Yeah. So it's how important is it for us to now, and this may seem like an easy question, but how important is it for us to now change our mindset so that when we get to those levels of leadership, that we're changing things from a top-down level as well. We're working on the grassroots level now in our sphere of influence. But how important is it for us to, at this point in our lives as youth, to change? Is it easier to change when you're older, or is the time in your youth
I think it's much easier. They always say it's much easier when you're younger than you are older, because it's for anything. Like you get into a liking of any food, or getting used to any food, or any other thing. So the younger is better for the change, because for young people the change also, it's easier for them to absorb the change and adapt than the old people. So definitely yes, the younger people are the ones who should start working on that. And also you have to understand, these are the things that it's not just because of a trend, a fashion or anything, but through realization, because this is the only way we can move as the human race. This is the way that we could protect our environment. We have huge issues of environment. The world is facing huge issues, and just one section of the population cannot solve it. Together we succeed. If you divide, we fall. It's not necessarily only for political parties or groups. It is to men and women as well.
So when it comes to the inclusion of women in peacebuilding and in the peacemaking process as a whole, how do you think the improvement of technology has helped that cause?
I think the improvement of technology, even today we are using it.
Well, yeah, right.
You send a letter to Colombia, it would have taken 3 months to go there if it went email, right? So, things definitely. The technology, as the biggest issue I see, that the technology has been used also for the wrongs much more quicker. In that sense, we have to blame ourselves because we are slow. So we need to really master the technology for the world good. But it's extremely important. As I told you, the vision of the youth to be together for a shared future. This is extremely important.
We have one planet, we have one opportunity as far as life is concerned for us to do things right. So coming together, bridging the gap along all lines and allowing for others to be involved. Amos, who's our national director in Uganda, has commented saying in some situations women are promoters of violence. Promoters of violence, funding, feeding, protecting the perpetrators with the belief that the violence will usher in a better life. So his question is, how do you then engage these women to change their mindset and in turn use them to engage the perpetrators to stop the violence?
Exactly. When you told that women are natural peace builders, I really didn't want to confront, but
that's what this is for.
No, but because it was coming from out, not necessarily from. If it was you, I would have confronted. I don't think that women are natural peace builders, but it's also. We are human beings. We are not a different species. So as humans, we all also have. But because of the fact that we bring, like men and women do have different values and strengths and weaknesses. So these are where the women are more prone to peace, because for them keeping the family together and also patience. So, I mean, bringing up a child, an infant who can't speak, only by crying and all, for at least 9 months to 1 year, the mother have to understand what the child wants. So these are the qualities that it's inbuilt within us.
Right.
So this is what exactly that women can bring. So otherwise it's not naturally that women are born so they are very peace and all. No, we know the queens have also fought wars, right? Have been also ruthless. Definitely this is because it's not necessarily only that women will be nurturing perpetrators and all. I mean, the men are the perpetrators that the women are nurturing, right? So it's exactly to speak with them. I mean, this is very important. That's why the community level engagement is utmost important, because to go to a house and speak, because I can remember there was a role play recently, I think in Morocco maybe, yes, there was a role play about like a woman goes and say, like, your son did this, was engaged in terrorist activities. She says, no, my son, don't come to tell me, he have never done something like that. So then they have to find a different method of convincing her to tell. And then she says, yes, I have noticed that he's different, so yes, I will start speaking to him.
Right.
So
the communication lines.
That's why it's extremely important, as in that grassroots level, at the community level, to speak with the women and make them understand. As much as we are trying to do it with the men. We're trying to do with our own sons,
right?
Because these are not aliens; these are our own sons who are perpetrating all this violence.
Right, and so it's finding that common ground, bridging the gap, and opening the lines for communication. That
very important. The communication, and also the compassion and understanding why the other person did what they did. Maybe it's a worst thing, but why did they do that? And try to work.
I'm trying to understand their point of view, their perspective.
Yeah.
From Chaminda, who is our national director for Sri Lanka Unites, he said there's a law for Muslim women. So when we talk about reconciliation and peace building through women, how do those who have maybe religious constraints enter this topic? How do you approach that?
There is no religious constraint in any religion for peace. The base of every religion is peace. Whether it is Judaism, whether it's Christianity, whether it's Islam, whether it's Bahaism, from that stream, whether it's Hinduism, whether it's Jainism, whether it's Sikhism, whether it's Buddhism. All speak about one thing, is peace. Definitely different teachers, in the sense like different priests, or the religious leaders may have different way of preaching, but basic religion for anyone doesn't hinder peace. So definitely there is no barrier whatsoever for any woman of any religion, or for that matter any man of any religion, to work for peace.
To stand up for it.
Yes, not at all. I mean, definitely, it's a very wrong perception that Islam teaches violence. No, not at all. It is a peaceful religion, as peaceful as any other religion.
Right.
It's just, interpretation of many religions. We have people.
Anybody can co-opt what they believe in to be a violent narrative.
For their own selfishness.
So Lakmal, who's our manager for our New Aurelia Center, he said that there's a problem with the way that government or even responsible parties have taken, that there's not really a trust in the peace building or reconciliation process. So what can be done to kind of bridge that gap or create a trust if there have been past wrongs when it comes to government involvement or the responsible parties even taking?
No, this is why I really hope that someone from the government is also listening this, because it's extremely important for the government of Sri Lanka today to have a coordinated effort. Right. Because we do know there are several ministries, we do know ONUR is there, so it's extremely important for the government to have a coordinated effort. There should be one entity who will be coordinating all these things. Similarly, we also do need one entity comprised of the civil society to come together to have some sort of a for understanding of what everybody does. But it should be in one drawing board to tell that this organization is doing this, so that there won't be duplication nor there will be gaps.
Right.
So that is extremely important, and youth of Sri Lanka can play a vital role in this. Of really bringing that writing the Facebook, tell the government you have to coordinate these efforts as well. You have to have a good communication strategy, because we don't know what you all are doing. We don't know what one ministry is doing or the other is doing. So we do need a communication strategy. The same way, the civil society also has to come together.
Right.
And at least people should know what the other is doing, because a lot of money is coming to the country, so the money has to go for the right things.
Right. It circles back to the making sure all the voices are heard, but it's not reinventing the wheel, right?
Yeah.
People are out there doing things. How can we work together on so many different levels?
Yeah, to take it forward.
Absolutely. So Rajito from our center in Monaragala here, he says it has now been decided 25% of women can be nominated for the election. So do you think this is helpful for reconciliation building in Sri Lanka?
Having 25% quota for women is extremely important, not only for reconciliation in Sri Lanka, for Sri Lankans' prosperity of the country, because of the fact that it's not necessarily only because we are 50% of the population, because of the fact that women's perspectives, we do have a different perspective. We will decide, especially on the local level, the women of the local level will decide where the washrooms of that particular building has to be built. Because, I always bring this example. In a bus stand, if you have first thing, you will not have a washroom. If you have a washroom, if it is in a dark place where there's no lights and all, a woman can't go. Yeah. So if there's a woman will tell, have it in a place where we could go. Right. Okay, the same thing, like even in a hospital where the buildings are built.
Right.
When a woman, the rooms for like the delivery rooms and all, where it has to be close proximity, because as much as the heart patients unit, right. Because these women comes with labor pain and it should be quickly to go there. Right. So if the women are there, they will tell about it.
Right.
Yeah, for
because
men,
the men don't really understand how that works.
No, right? They will not understand, and especially washrooms. For men, it's difficult for them to understand, because for them it's not that kind of a necessity as much as for a woman.
Right. No, absolutely. That makes a ton of sense. It's hard to tell people how things need to go and kind of organize things for moving things forward if you can't fully understand or empathize or understand where the perspective's coming from or the issues that they're faced. It's like what I had mentioned earlier. It's hard to create peace or create a process moving forward when you're only taking half of society into account.
Yeah, and what is reconciliation? Yeah. Reconciliation is everybody in this country feeling that we are equal citizens of this country. So, including women. Right. It's not necessarily only the Tamil, Sinhala and Muslims. No, but also women.
Right. It's all of us. It's not just ethnicities, but genders.
Just because we have not taken arms or we have not fought, nobody can discriminate us. We have
to be a part of the conversation and have to be given opportunities to make the positive changes.
Definitely, together we could walk. As I told you, together we could walk.
Yeah, in fact, that's something that I think humanity just in general needs to work on, right? Working together, finding ways to bridge the gaps and moving things
and
forward.
Also, exactly, bringing these strengths together. Like for Sri Lanka, when we speak about reconciliation, I really want to tell this. Sri Lanka is really unique, and we are very fortunate to have all these different communities, different ethnicities in our country. Right. That exactly we have to celebrate it. I always tell the Sinhalese, the agricultural ability of the Sinhalese and the administration ability of the Tamil people, the business ability of the Muslim people, and the entertainment ability of the burghers. So putting all these together, right. That's who we are. Yeah, so we have to celebrate it.
Absolutely. And using the strengths of the others to help us in our weaknesses where we might not be able to.
Otherwise, how can we move forward? Just see in Sri Lanka, we will never close this country, right? Yeah. Because if one community has a holiday, the others are open.
Yeah.
So this country will never close. Anyone can come to this country at any day of the year.
Right.
Something will be open because we are a multicultural, multi-religious country.
Right.
That is itself is a big asset.
It's a huge asset, but it's looked on by maybe a lot of people as a negative, right?
That's because they don't understand. Just imagine getting down, like you have 24 hours, you come into the country, my goodness, today is Sunday, everything is closed in that country. Will you want to go to that country accidentally, even if you are on transiting?
Right.
You won't, definitely no. Why? Okay, right, poor day. If everything is closed on a poor day. So no, for 12 days in a year, nobody will come to this country.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, it's absolutely. No, I see exactly what you're saying. So as we kind of get closer towards the end, what are some things that we can maybe take as action points? Some things that as individuals, as communities, if we're leaders in the community, that we can do to be proponents of, and maybe it's just summarizing some of the stuff that we've talked about already tonight, but what are some things that we can practically do to be proponents of the inclusion of women in peace building on the grassroots, peacemaking on the top levels?
Yeah, as I told you, women are peace building at the grassroots. Right. I mean, it's there, so there's nothing to take action on that, but to recognize that. That's what is important, to recognize that, and and also if you really want to do something about it, document it, publicize it,
right.
Let the others know.
Yeah, take advantage of where technology is to be able to publicize.
Publicize it. It's extremely important to publicize the very small initiatives that the women do at the grassroots, because these small initiatives goes a long way. So that's one thing that, especially because you are a youth group, that's one thing to do. And also always make it a point that unless otherwise you have half women and half men, if you have 10 people, if you don't have 5, then you can't take a decision, because that decision will not be right. Let us at least practice in our own...
Every day. Like you said, in the office, right? If you're making decisions, let others be involved.
Because definitely there will be something, specifically because of the fact that we do have different senses. I mean, we are not the same. There's fundamental difference of the way, it's not only biological, it's also the way of thinking. There is definitely the way of thinking. I mean, we have weaknesses and strengths.
Right. And so it's really being intentional with allowing it in our own circles, whatever your sphere of influence is, being a proponent of it, to engage in conversation, to allow ideas to be given to you and to use those ideas, not just to allow them to be heard, but to actually implement them.
And also not necessarily just because someone have told, but think for yourself. Think for yourself think for yourself, argue about it, think for yourself, and then with conviction, with understanding, then believe it.
It's almost as if nowadays we just find what we want to hear from technology and believe it, right? Without wrestling with it anymore.
No,
it's almost like it's a negative to wrestle.
Specifically, I'm a Buddhist. So one basic principle of Buddhism is you argue, you question every possible thing,
right, and
then accept it if you think it is right. Otherwise you can reject it. So, I mean, coming from Sri Lanka, and when we have a tradition of arguing for everything, do that, argue and see. Without women, how much successful it is.
Right. How far can we move forward if we don't include?
At home, I mean, simple thing.
Right.
If only the father take decisions. Just ask everybody, if father is the one who's taking decisions for tomorrow's lunch, how it will be.
Yeah. I understand.
It has to be father and mother both.
Right. But like you said, it starts in the home, it starts in our workplace, in doing it on an individual level, and then when we get opportunities on a bigger scale, take advantage of it and really be intentional with it. Are there any other parting words before we close out that you'd like to share with us?
No, I mean, for us, for everybody, it's extremely important for us to understand that, I want to repeat and say that we do bring different strengths and we do have different weaknesses. The most important thing is to come together so that we can use those strengths, those values, and make the world a better place for all of us.
And as hard as it'll be, men need to put their pride aside, women need to put their pride aside when they come to the table, right? And when they have these conversations, because there will be disagreements.
This is... If you can't negotiate between men and women, how on earth we are expecting to negotiate between two warring parties. Simple as that.
I think that's a perfect way to end it. We want to thank each and every one of you for joining us and being a part of this conversation. We want to thank you for taking the time, and we want to thank Ms. Dharmadasa for the engaging conversation. Thank you for all of your questions. We look forward to continuing the conversation. If there are topics that you want us to discuss, please let us know so that we can look to have them in future things moving forward. Again, thank you so much for taking time and spending time with us. It's been very insightful for me just on a personal level, and it was I so much looked forward to this conversation, and it was just so much so insightful for me. So we hope that you have a great rest of the day, a great morning, a great evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much for joining us.